Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever had that feeling, like you're making all your own choices, but somehow there's this subtle, almost invisible hand guiding you?
Hmm.
Today, we're diving deep into exactly that with a really powerful concept from the French philosopher Michel Foucault called governmentality.
Right, governmentality. It sounds a bit complex, but it's essentially Foucault's way of looking at power beyond just kings and laws.
Okay.
He fused government and mentality. So it's about the act of governing, yes, but also the ways of thinking, the mental frameworks that make governing possible.
The mentality behind the governing.
Exactly. Foucault called it the conduct of conduct, how institutions, often quite subtly, shape how we behave, how we think, our actions.
That's force, then.
Not primarily, no, not like old school sovereign power. It's more about managing life, managing populations. So our mission today is really to unpack how this works, how it guides you, maybe in ways you haven't even considered.
Okay, so this conduct of conduct, influencing how we conduct ourselves, how does that actually play out? Especially, compared to those older forms of power you mentioned.
Well, the contrast is key. Think about traditional power kings, emperors. It relied heavily on direct force, punishment, big public displays of authority. Do this or else.
Right, very visible.
Very visible. Modern governmentality, Foucault argues, is different. It's much more decentralized, kind of diffuse. It operates through norms, expectations, statistics, bureaucracies.
Less about the sword and more about the spreadsheet.
Sort of. And it marks this big shift towards what he termed biopolitics. The focus becomes governing life itself, populations, health, longevity, productivity.
Can you give an example of that shift?
Sure. Think about health. Instead of, say, punishing people directly for being unhealthy, modern systems tend to promote wellness. You see health campaigns, fitness apps, those self-tracking devices.
Fitbit, Apple Watch.
Exactly. They encourage you, the individual, to manage your own body, track your steps, your calories. It feels like empowerment, right? Like you're choosing it for your own good.
Yeah, it feels like self-improvement, not like being governed.
And that's the core of how it works. It nudges us into managing ourselves according to certain norms.
Okay, that's where it gets really interesting for me. How do we become these self-governing subjects? You mentioned Foucault's technologies of the self. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. Technologies of the self are the practices we use to shape ourselves, often in line with these broader norms. And institutions play a huge role here.
Like schools.
Schools are a classic example. Yes, they teach reading and math, but they also train you in other ways, being punctual, following schedules, being orderly, productive. Think about report cards, attendance records.
Surveillance, basically.
Well, yes, but it's surveillance that encourages you to internalize the discipline. Eventually, you start monitoring yourself. You aim for good grades, perfect attendance, not just because someone is watching, but because you've adopted those goals as your own.
And a more contemporary example.
Oh, definitely social media and health platforms. Instagram, Fitbit, wellness apps. These aren't, government mandates.
Right, you choose to use them.
You opt in. You track your steps, your diet, your mood, maybe even your social interactions. You monitor and adjust your behavior, believing it's purely for personal betterment. This is a real hallmark of self-governance, especially under what some call neoliberal thinking, this idea that we're each responsible for managing our own success, our own well-being.
So if power isn't just top-down anymore, and we're kind of seemingly free but also subtly directed, what does that mean for our sense of freedom and individual responsibility? And it sounds almost paradoxical.
It really is. The implication is that power becomes diffuse, almost invisible, working through us and our desires. We feel free making our own choices, but those choices are often shaped by norms we've internalized.
And responsibility.
Well, think about it. If problems like, say, poverty or poor health or unemployment arise, the focus often shifts onto the individual's choices or perceived failures rather than looking at systemic factors. Did you try hard enough? Did you manage your health properly?
Right. It puts the onus entirely on the person.
Exactly. And that can make harder to see, let alone resist, the broader power structures at play because it all feels so voluntary, irrational. Like it's just common sense to track your steps or work harder.
That does feel a bit bleak almost. Does Foucault leave any room for resistance, or are we just shaped by these norms without any way to push back?
That's a really important point and a common critique. Some argue Foucault's model can seem a bit too totalizing, perhaps underplaying agency. People do resist. They reinterpret norms, bend rules, find ways to carve out different ways of being within these systems.
So it's not inescapable.
Power is always relational, according to Foucault. Where there's power, there's potential resistance. It's a dynamic, not a one-way street, even if the power is subtle.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive into governmentality.
Yeah.
It really shifts how you think about power, doesn't it? Not just being ruled from above, but being gently guided to rule ourselves.
It certainly does. And it leaves us with a question, perhaps for you listening. In what parts of your own life do you notice yourself self-governing? Following certain norms, tracking yourself, shaping your conduct, maybe without even consciously thinking about where those impulses came from?
Something to definitely ponder as you go about your day.